Rain hammered against the thin tin roof of Aaliyah's tiny one-bedroom apartment, each drop echoing through the silence like a reminder of the world's weight. The walls were chipped, the paint long faded, and the floor creaked under every step. She had grown used to it. Life had taught her to adjust, to survive with little, and to find comfort where most people saw none. Working 2 jobs, days at the grocery store and nights at the diner, barely covered the rent and bills. Most months, she lived on noodles and day-old bread, yet through all the hardship, she held on to one truth her late mother had drilled into her: kindness costs nothing, but can mean everything. That night, after trudging home from another exhausting shift, her shoes soaked from puddles and her jacket barely holding off the storm, she spotted something unusual. Just a few steps away from her building's front door, a man stood holding a small girl. His coat was drenched, water dripping down the sleeves, and his hair plastered against his forehead. The little girl clung to him, her thin dress sticking to her body, lips trembling in the cold night air. Aaliyah's first instinct was to walk past quickly. The neighborhood wasn't known for safety, and she had little reason to trust strangers lingering in the dark. But then the man looked up, his eyes tired yet polite, and he spoke in a tone that wasn't demanding, just quietly desperate. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you," he began, his voice shaking not from fear but from exhaustion. "My daughter and we don't have anywhere to stay tonight. Could you help us, just for one night?" The words hung in the air heavier than the rain. Aaliyah froze. She had almost nothing, barely enough to keep herself afloat. Her apartment wasn't a place of comfort, it was cramped, drafty, and furnished with items others had thrown away. And inviting strangers inside was dangerous. But her eyes fell on the little girl again. 8, maybe 9 years old, her small frame shivering as she clutched her father's arm. The sight pierced straight through Aaliyah's hesitation. "Come in," she said softly, surprising even herself. "It's not much, but it's warm." The man's shoulders slumped with relief, his gratitude immediate. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking slightly. He followed her upstairs, careful not to track too much rainwater inside, and Aaliyah noticed the way he carried himself, respectfully, almost cautiously, as if he didn't want to intrude more than necessary. Inside, her apartment felt even smaller with 3 people. She gave the girl her only blanket, the one she usually wrapped around herself to fight the drafts at night, and set a dented pot on the stove. From the cupboard, she pulled out her last can of chicken noodle soup. As it warmed, the smell filled the room, a fragile kind of comfort. They sat together in silence, the storm raging outside while the little girl cradled the bowl between her hands. Slowly, color returned to her cheeks, and a shy smile tugged at her lips. Aaliyah watched her eat and thought, no child should sleep cold and hungry in the rain. She didn't know who they were, where they came from, or what tomorrow would bring. But for that one night, she decided, they would be safe. The next morning, sunlight seeped through the thin curtains of Aaliyah's apartment, casting a pale golden glow across the small space. She stirred awake to the soft sound of humming. When she opened her eyes, she found a little girl sitting cross-legged at the tiny kitchen table, a crayon in her hand as she doodled on the back of an old receipt Aaliyah had left lying around. The girl's dark curls fell across her face, and her expression was peaceful, as though the night's storm had been nothing more than a bad dream. Her father, Daniel, was already awake too. He stood near the sink, carefully folding the thin blanket Aaliyah had given them as if it were priceless silk. His movements were precise, deliberate, and strangely refined, nothing like the hurried gestures of someone living in desperation. He glanced up and gave Aaliyah a polite smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice steadier than the night before. "You've already done more than enough, but, if you don't mind, I'd like to make breakfast for you. You've shared so much, let me share something back." Aaliyah blinked, taken aback. No one had cooked for her in years. Her meals were usually eaten alone, standing over the sink after work. Still, she nodded. "Sure, but I don't have much." She gestured to her nearly bare cupboards, a few eggs, a half loaf of bread, and some instant coffee. Daniel smiled as though she had given him a feast. "It's more than enough." Within minutes, the apartment filled with the sizzling sound of eggs frying in the pan and the rich, toasty aroma of bread crisping on the stove. The little girl, Lily, as Daniel introduced her, clapped her hands softly, delighted at the smell. Aaliyah found herself watching the scene, almost disbelieving. For once, her apartment didn't feel like a place of struggle. It felt alive, filled with warmth and laughter. Over breakfast, they talked. Daniel spoke little about himself but shared stories with Lily, gentle, imaginative tales about castles, far-off cities, and people who found magic in ordinary places. Lily giggled, leaning against her father, her eyes shining with love. Aaliyah listened quietly, touched by the bond they shared. Still, she couldn't help but notice small details. Daniel's posture was confident, not beaten down like most men she'd seen fall on hard times. His voice carried a calm authority, each word carefully chosen. And though his coat was ragged, she glimpsed his wristwatch when he reached for the pan, a piece that, though scratched and old, had once clearly been expensive. But she pushed the thoughts aside. Everyone had a past, and it wasn't her place to judge. When breakfast was done, Daniel tidied the table, insisting on washing the dishes despite Aaliyah's protests. Then he gently told Lily it was time to go. He turned back to Aaliyah, reaching into his pocket. "You've been too kind. Please, let me give you something." But Aaliyah shook her head firmly. "No, I didn't do this for money. I know what it's like to have nothing. I couldn't let your little girl go through that." For a moment, Daniel simply looked at her. His expression softened, almost as if he were seeing something rare, something the world didn't show him often. He nodded slowly, tucking his hand back into his pocket. "Then I promise you this," he said quietly. "I'll never forget what you did for us." And with that, he and Lily left, disappearing into the bustling streets below, leaving Aaliyah alone with a strange heaviness in her chest. Days melted into weeks, and life returned to its usual rhythm for Aaliyah. She went back to working long shifts at the grocery store and diner, walking home through the same cracked sidewalks and broken streetlights. But even as life pressed on, her thoughts often drifted back to Daniel and Lily. She wondered where they had gone, if they had found shelter, if the little girl was safe and warm. The memory of Lily's small smile as she clutched the blanket lingered in her heart, comforting her on nights when loneliness and exhaustion weighed heavily. One Friday evening, rain threatened again, and Aaliyah trudged up the stairwell of her crumbling building, her bag heavy with groceries. She was halfway to her door when she froze. Parked outside the entrance wasn't one of the usual rusted cars of her neighborhood but a sleek black luxury vehicle that gleamed beneath the streetlights. Its presence alone made the entire block look out of place. As she approached cautiously, a figure stepped out. The man's tailored suit hugged his frame perfectly, polished shoes clicking against the pavement. His posture was straight, commanding, the aura of someone who carried power without needing to flaunt it. But what stopped Aaliyah in her tracks wasn't the car or the suit, it was the small figure who suddenly broke away from his side. "Aaliyah," the little girl squealed, running full speed toward her. Lily threw her arms around Aaliyah's waist, beaming up at her with joy. Aaliyah bent down, stunned, brushing the child's curls back from her face. "Lily," she whispered, disbelief flooding her voice. Her gaze lifted to the man walking toward her, and her heart nearly skipped. It was Daniel, but not the Daniel she remembered. Gone was the soaked coat, the weary eyes, the air of desperation. In his place stood a man radiating quiet confidence, every detail about him refined and deliberate. "I owe you an explanation," Daniel said softly, stopping just a step away. His voice carried the same calm warmth she remembered, but now there was something stronger beneath it. "I wasn't completely honest that night. My daughter and I weren't truly homeless. We were escaping for a little while. I wanted to show Lily what real kindness looks like, without wealth or appearances clouding the truth. We needed to meet someone genuine. And we found that in you." Aaliyah blinked, trying to process his words. "You mean, I'm a businessman," he continued. "A wealthy one, but money doesn't buy compassion, or warmth, or dignity. You gave us all of that freely. And I will never forget it." Aaliyah's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to protest, to say she didn't need anything in return, but Daniel raised a hand gently. "I don't want to repay you with a handful of bills. I want to give you opportunity. A better home, support for the dreams you've put on hold because of hardship. You gave my daughter hope. You reminded me that true kindness still exists." Lily squeezed Aaliyah's hand, her eyes bright. "You're our angel," she whispered. Tears pricked at Aaliyah's eyes as she stood there, caught between disbelief and gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt the heavy weight of her struggles lift. Maybe her mother had been right all along. Kindness, no matter how small, always finds its way back when you least expect it.